Buddhism reveals why your mind tries to kill you. There's a Calvin and Hobbes cartoon where Calvin's sitting on a sled at the top of the hill and he's thinking, "Go ahead, go down the hill. You won't run into that boulder. You won't run into that stream. It's not too steep." And in the last panel, he turns and says to the reader, "My brain is trying to kill me." And that's one of the main problems in life. Your mind is trying to kill you. If not kill you physically, it's trying to kill your goodness, kill your possibility for really getting anywhere in the practice. Ajahn Mahabua talks about how when he was a young monk, he was afraid to go out and practice for fear that it would be wasted energy. There was a belief in those days that the time for jnana had passed, the time for nirvana had passed, and he was afraid any effort in that direction would be wasted. He got over the fear by realizing that whatever the Buddha taught was not meant to be an executioner of your happiness. Whatever's required of the path, whether it's easy, whether it's difficult, it's all good. And it's not that progress happens only when the path is easy or only when you're enjoying it. There's a sutta where the Buddha talks about how some things are good in the present, good in the future, good in the present, bad in the future, bad in the present, good in the future, bad in the present, and bad in the future. The one that's bad in the present but good in the future, he says, is the case where a person is practicing the Dharma, leading the holy life, thoroughly miserable, tears running down his cheeks, but he's willing to stick with it. In cases like that, the mind has lots of ways of pulling you away, and you have to watch out for them. Learn how to catch the mind when it's lying to you. Sometimes it comes as psychotherapy saying, forcing yourself is bad for you, you know. It's unhealthy. And all the jargon that therapists have cooked up to keep people from exerting themselves, to keep them happy with a life that really is not worth being happy with. Like the therapist I was talking to up in Vancouver last year, he was working in a storefront that offers psychological counseling to drug addicts. And he was telling me that for years they had trouble just getting people to come in off the street for free therapy. They found the one approach that worked to at least pull the people into the storefront was to help them work on their self-esteem. But the problem was that they ended up with clients who had high self-esteem but were still on drugs. They were perfectly okay now with taking drugs. They didn't feel bad about themselves for taking drugs. And the therapist was beginning to realize that this was not an advance. It was actually a setback. There's a lot of that in psychotherapy. Therapists will tell you that there are a lot of fellow therapists who are afraid they're going to lose their clients. So they tell the clients whatever they think the clients want to hear. And because psychotherapy claims to be a science, it begins to sound scientific. So we have to watch out for that. People even use the Dhamma as a way of lying to themselves, using the wrong Dhamma at the wrong time. There's a classic case of that in the 4-volume novel Joseph and His Brothers. Joseph has been working as a slave in charge of Potiphar's house, and Potiphar's wife has been trying to seduce him for an entire volume of the novel. And you think he's been able to steer clear of her. But then one day, the whole family goes out for a holiday that requires everybody to go over to the west side of the river for ceremonies at the tombs. When they come back home, there's going to be a big dinner, and Potiphar's wife lets it be known that she's not feeling well, so she's going to stay home alone in the house. At first, Joseph goes over with the group to the west side of the river, but then he starts telling himself, "Gee, as a responsible steward here, I really ought to go check the arrangements back at the house." This is followed with a long series of little maxims that he repeats to himself to convince himself that that's his duty to go back. So, as a fool, he ends up going back and Potiphar's wife attacks him physically. He's able to get away, but she has his cloak in her hand, the evidence that he tried to rape her. It's because of that he has to go into prison, all out of a false sense of duty. So you have to watch out for the voice in the mind that says, well, you'd really be better off. You've got this duty. You've got that duty. But is it genuinely your duty? That's one of the most seductive ways the mind has of lying to itself. This is why, when you meditate, you have to learn how to say no to every thought that comes up. It's your first line of defense. That means not just putting it aside, but questioning it. Is that really true? Is that so? Is that so? You could ask. And then watch. Try to keep the mind in position with the breath or just with the sense of the body in the present moment, staying outside of your thought worlds. And remember the old principle, don't believe everything you think, because it's very rarely that we fall for just raw desire. Desires have their reasons. This was an old problem in ancient philosophy. Plato said that reason and desire are two totally separate functions of the mind. But then the Stoics noticed that, no, if you can reason with your desires or reason can win out over desires, you're not winning out through sheer force. If desires actually listen to reason, it means they have reasons of their own. And often they won't tell you what their real reasons are. They're like politicians. They wave a flag over here so they can do their dirty work over there. If you really love yourself, really care for yourself, really want to put an end to suffering, you have to learn to recognize the red herrings, the distractions, the good-seeming reasons that are actually going to lead you astray. Often they're in terms of abstractions. This is one way you can recognize them. The Buddha didn't deal with abstractions. He dealt with actions, specific actions. This action, what is it going to lead to? That action, what is it going to lead to? Where does it tend? If you get pulled off into abstractions, you get pulled further and further away from the actual mental act of seeing the connection between the action and the result. This is why a lot of meditation is a matter of staying under the radar. Abstractions are flying through the air, but you stay down close to the ground. Just watch. When I think in this way, what's the tone in the body? What's the tone in the mind? Where is this leading? Which of my defilements wants me to believe this? It's like that old way of protecting yourself when you're reading magazines or newspapers. Somebody wants me to believe this. Why? That way, you don't get entirely pulled in by a skewed way of thinking. This is one of the most valuable gifts of the practice. It gives you a place here with the breath where you can step back and watch your thought worlds in terms of cause and effect. This is how the Buddha himself said he got onto the path. After realizing that jhana was one of the factors of the path, he had to work on right resolve, i.e., training his mind to see what kind of thoughts lead toward concentration and what kind of thoughts lead away from concentration. In the same way, you look at your thoughts in terms of cause and effect. To what extent are they bringing the mind to a sense of well-being or ease? Of course, sometimes the path to that ease is going to be hard. The Buddha never said it's going to be easy all along the way. You have to keep an eye toward the long-term results of what you're doing. So the concentration, as you're working at it, develops a set of skills that enable you to gauge what's being said in the mind, so that you can figure out who's lying to you and who's telling the truth. Who has your best interests in mind and who doesn't? Remember that image of a John Lees, of all kinds of beings, germs and whatnot, in your bloodstream. A thought goes through your brain, and maybe it's the thought of one of those little beings going through the bloodstream around your brain. Thinking in this way reminds you that you don't have to identify with everything that comes up in the mind or gets lodged in the body as an emotion. I've been reading about the Romantics and the Transcendentalists, how they really had a strong respect for the mind's intuitions, and they gave them absolute authority. That's dangerous. You can't give absolute authority to anything. You have to test everything and test the way you test things. And in the testing, you try to develop the ability to judge more and more reliably. This is why we take refuge in the Buddha to begin with, because we need someone as an example, someone with whose example we can compare our thoughts or actions or our words until we reach the point where we really can depend on ourselves. So, if anything's pulling you away from the practice, remember, it's lying to you. And it's not going to present itself simply as raw desire. It's going to have its reasons, some of which sound very smooth and convincing. One of the skills you have to develop as a meditator is to learn how to see through that. One of Ajahn Fuang's traits that really struck me when I first met him was how skeptical he was. He wasn't willing to jump to conclusions, either believing or not believing. He'd watch and he'd watch some more and he'd watch some more. That's how to prevent even your insights from getting hijacked by your defilements. When an insight comes in, pride can arise around it, which is why Upasika Ki Nanayan always advise that whenever an insight comes, watch to see what happens next and what happens next and then what happens next. Ajahn Lee's test would be, if you gain an insight, ask yourself, to what extent is what you just learned true? To what extent is its opposite true? It's this ability to step back and watch that's so important, so that ultimately you can see through to the truth. Passion for nostalgia. Nostalgia seems to be such an innocent pleasure. We're not taking anything away from anyone else. We're not planning to stake claims on anything in the future. We're just rifling through our own memories. But it is one of the causes for samsara. We think of places we've been, and we'd like to go back. If that desire hits you at the moment of death, it's going to have an impact on where you go. And even now, in the present moment, it blinds you to what you're doing right now. You're off in another world someplace. So you have to see that nostalgia has its drawbacks. First off, you can never really go back to the way things were. Even if you go back to the same place and physically nothing much has changed, you've changed as a person. The other people around there have changed too. You end up going back and you find out that it's not the place you thought it was. Part of this, of course, has to do with the fact that your nostalgic memory is like every memory of sensual pleasure. It's very selective. When you were back at that spot in that time, there were uncertainties, there were fears, disappointments. But the feeling of what it was like to actually live in that space at that time gets scrubbed, so that only the nice details remain. So you have to realize, your mind is lying to you, and you don't want your life to be directed by lies. So, as when dealing with any unskillful mind state or any unskillful habit, the Buddha offers several ways of analyzing things to get free from the nostalgia. First off, he says you have to see it as something separate. The memory is one thing, you're something else. Don't go into it. Step out of it and see. This is something the mind is creating right now. When you see it as something separate, then there are two modes of analysis that the Buddha would have you pursue. One is to take it apart into its individual components. The memory is composed of some feelings, some perceptions, some thought fabrications. Just tease them out. Which are the perceptions? What are the ways you're talking to yourself about them? See those as separate components. The more you see them as separate components, the more you realize that they're pretty ephemeral. Hints, whispers, shadows of things, nothing really substantial. And yet you want this to guide your life, to guide your future. The other type of analysis is to see it as part of a causal process. What gives rise to this nostalgic memory? Sometimes, of course, it just pops up on its own, but then you go for it. This is where you have to look for the allure. Why do you go for it? What are you missing right now? And what are the stages by which the mind goes into it? A thought pops up and it doesn't come up fully formed. It's going to be, again, hints and whispers, and part of the mind says, hey, this could be a memory of my old time back then. Let's go for it and fill in the blanks. You come with a ready-made script. Where did that come from? How many times have you been over certain memories and added something new each time? Why? What is it that the mind wants to milk out of this memory? And then, where does it go? So look at the memory as part of a causal process. It comes, and then it goes. Then it comes back again some other time and goes again. When it goes, why does it go? Partly because of those component factors it's made out of. These things have to be sustained. There has to be an act of attention and intention to keep them going, and the intention has to be fed by the allure. But you have to realize that this is all suffering. You're clinging to these different aggregates. And what are you getting out of them? You're placing ruts in the mind, or as the Buddha would say, you're bending the mind. We would say they're ruts. You get into the rut and it's hard to get out. This is one of the reasons why the Buddha said that lack of nostalgia is one of the ways of putting an end to suffering, because you see that your memories are totally unreliable. They may have a little bit of truth to them, but each time you take them out of the mind and look at them and put them back, something changes. It's like a person going through a library, picking out a book, and then doing what librarians hate, which is to mark up the book and put it back in a different place. Keep on doing that and the whole library gets rearranged. The books are rewritten. Nobody can find anything. Then you have to remember that the place, the time for which you feel the nostalgia, is long gone. It's the nature of all time. If you were to go back, you'd find it would pass, pass, pass. Think of Ajahn Fuang's comment that the sensual pleasures for which we really have strong desires are the ones that we've had in the past, but we lost them, and now we want them back again. And suppose we do get them back again, we're going to lose them again. Where are you going to find any fulfillment? Where does anything come to any kind of conclusion? Where can you really lay claim to something and say, I've got it for sure? It's like trying to put something in a net, but the net has a big hole in the bottom. Like catching a butterfly with a net like that. You catch it, and it just flies out of the net. In the meantime, you've been chasing the butterfly deeper and deeper into unknown territory. If you create this as a habit, then this is where the mind is going to go as life comes to an end. At that point, you're not going to want to be thinking about the future very much. It doesn't present much in terms of hope, so the mind will cast back to the past because the mind is really good at looking for pleasures wherever it can find them. You see people in pretty miserable situations, and yet they're always looking for pleasure of some kind. What are the possibilities there? And they'll grasp at anything. Well, the mind as it approaches death is going to grasp at anything, unless it's trained. We're training it, now, so that when those memories come up, we can take them apart into their component parts. We can see them as part of a causal process and gain a sense of samvega around them, so that the next time they come, we're not quite so likely to want to go for them. This is good work to be doing now so that you don't have to do all the work then. You want to master this as a skill, how to step out of mind states, how to take them apart, so that you can end this process of wandering into them, creating worlds and then wandering into the worlds. It just goes on and on and on and never really arrives anywhere. As the Buddha saw on the night of his awakening, if you try to cast back in the past to see how long this has been going on, you can't find the beginning point. More than that, he said it's inconceivable. What would a beginning point be? As for how much longer it's going to go on, that depends on whether you train the mind. Think of all the lives you've been through. If you can't remember specific lifetimes, just think about it in general terms, eons and eons of being different beings. It's all gone, gone, gone. And what does the future hold if you don't get out? Just more of the same, things that come and then go, go, go. When you think about this, it's pretty chastening. It should be enough to get the mind to be more willing to stay here in the present moment, to tell itself, I've got to figure out the motor behind all this. What keeps generating these thoughts? What keeps wanting to go for them? What can be done to turn the motor off? When you see that everything it creates will fall apart, you begin to wonder, why should I just keep on creating? That's when you've really got the attitude that's ready for the practice. You've been chastened. You have a sense of dismay, but you don't get depressed. You're confident that there is a way out. This is why the Buddha has you delight in the Dhamma, to delight in developing skillful qualities and taking unskillful qualities apart. It's a fascinating project. Rather than being fascinated by your nostalgic memories of the past, be fascinated by what the mind is doing and how it deceives itself right now. If you can develop a passion and delight for that, that delight leads you in the right direction.